Today I'm talking to Rosamund Davies and Camera Hall about this book, Story Cities. And this is quite an unusual book for Arachne in that it wasn't my idea. Because Rosamund and Cam came and bearded me in my den at the London Book Fair a couple of years ago now, isn't it?
So long ago, yeah.
So long ago. And managed to catch me in a 10-minute, I wasn't talking to someone else. So I said, yes, okay, sit down, let's talk. Couldn't hear a word that's being said. It's like being in an aircraft hangar full of people who are shouting at each other there. So, and once we'd established that we were all reasonably low, I said, right, we'll take this somewhere else. So I'll hand over to Rosamund to tell me what the grand idea was.
Well, the basic idea was a book of short stories about the city, very short stories, flash fiction, to be read in situ, to be read actually in the city. That was the basic idea, and there were kind of three principal ideas behind that, sort of how it would work as a reading experience. So the first was that it would be a kind of three-way dialogue between the reader and the book and the city, the space of the city, so that you would have the stories would be kind of activating the space if you read them in the space, but at the same time, when you're in the city, what you're actually seeing and hearing and smelling and so on is affecting your reading of the story and also your own experience and memories of this city and other cities. So that was kind of one idea behind it, that sort of activating the space. And the second idea was that it would be to be about any city and every city. That it wouldn't be that you take the book and it was about London and you'd read it in London. It would be that all the stories would be about the experience of being in a city, and you could go to any city and read it there, and it would be obviously slightly different depending on where you read it, but it would be about the space and time of kind of all cities. And the third idea was this sort of idea of correspondence and dissonance, so that if you could read the stories in the book and it might be quite close to what you're seeing around you, so the cafe that you're reading about or the city square, what you're seeing kind of echoes what's in the book. But equally, if it was very different, if the atmosphere felt very different or was set in a different time, or people were doing, or the space felt different, that would also work, because the kind of gap between the two stories would kind of open up space for the imagination. And it was really all about a book about the city that would get the reader actively involved and kind of, creating their experience of the city through reading the book. So that was the idea.
Mm-hmm. And when did the idea about it being flash fiction come in?
I think right from the beginning, because if you even a short story takes a while to read, and the idea really was so the idea was, that it would be that flash fiction would be short enough, these kind of intense moments, and also flash fiction is quite spare and leaves a lot to the imagination. You have to fill in the gaps, and that seemed to work best with the idea of the
leaves
book.
Room for the where you're reading it to impact.
Yeah, exactly. So it was always going to be flash fiction, and then pretty early on it was also had to be lots and lots of writers, because we needed to have this sense of the city as multiple perspectives. So we wanted to get lots of writers involved in writing the flash fiction. Yeah, so I suppose that's what we pitched, more or less.
The more people you have involved, the more real cities they're thinking about while they're writing. They're not telling us what that city is, so you're getting this sort of more scope for the versions of the city. Yeah. Because otherwise it's kind of limited to where you've been.
Yeah.
Okay, so Cam, the very crucial for this particular book, design, the thinking behind that and how you came about the concept.
Yeah, and so I think from early conversations with Ros, I was really interested in this idea of the multiplicity of voices and the idea of the whole sort of collaborative experience of coming up with a book object. And I think early on we thought about sort of different modes or formats that, you know, this might take, that might occur with this particular project. But I think we were both really interested in a physical object, a physical book, that it's something which is tangible. We were excited by the sort of the tactile nature of that sort of item, and how it could travel along with its readers and sort of move. So, you know, so my own work, I'm not a writer, you know, sort of my own kind of trespasses into sort of writing have been much more from a formal perspective. So whether that's a graphic novel or poetry or illustrated books. So these are sort of the experiences and the kind of methods of working that I was in touch with. And so the opportunity to work with Rosamund, who's very much a writer, and sort of, you know, to have that kind of shared conversations, I suppose, between the two of us, and then certainly Cherry, when you came into the team as well. So the three of us sort of having that dynamic of working together was really exciting. In terms of design of the book itself, I think with any project, you know, you're working with constraints, you're working with limitations, and you're working with whether those be economical, whether those be a deadline or time-based, you know. So for me, what's really key is that that time is spent doing something which is perhaps not available prior. And so doing something which is affords this sense of interest or newness to it. You know, I don't want to sort of be repeating things, you know, necessarily. So thinking about what the opportunity offered in terms of design was really exciting. And we're working with conventions already in terms of the sort of the short story format, the flash fiction format, working with sort of a collaboration between other writers. So there's an anthology aspect to it as well. But by convention, it's not about sort of things which are not sort of useful or exciting or interesting, because a lot of these things are about the tradition of the book object itself and how things have been developed over you know, tried and tested methods which work seamlessly and beautifully well. So as a designer, you want to sort of come into that conversation not sort of just to imprint your mark, but to try and sort of work with those available sort of scenarios as well. So I wanted to kind of you know, unite this idea of the story, give the authors as much space and voice as possible without imposing something on top. So this is the idea of the design, that it worked in a way that was sort of unique to what the project was, but not trying to sort of do something in a forceful way.
Yeah. So when we were talking about it, the sort of the guidelines that we worked on were that basically it is a guidebook, so it needs to be very portable. You know, broadly speaking, needs to fit into the back pocket of your jeans. I don't think it quite does. It fit in the poacher's pocket in your jacket, maybe. But I think
a big pair of jeans.
Of your jeans, sadly. But that's just because we had so much good stuff that you know, it ended up being reasonably thick. And that then led on to the breaking things down into what kind of story it was. So we went for places in the city as though it were a guidebook. So you arrive at the station, and then you go and find your hotel, and you go out for a meal, and then you have a wander around the fancy places on the high streets and the squares and the parks. And then you get lost and end up in the side streets. And that really worked. And it meant that we had sections in the book which then gave you another opportunity to do some design. So do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I think the process of sort of making was, I didn't want it to sort of have the feel of something which was generic or didn't have a sense of itself. So, you know, I jumped at the opportunity to work with lots of different kind of design ideas, but thinking about something, the physical, tactile nature was something I wanted to really get across. So I used a printing method, which is direct printing and I looked around for lots of different materials and looked around for things which made interesting marks, and then eventually found something which was probably not traditionally used in design for books or printing. Was I found this rubberized material, which was my son, who was 6 at the time, his bath mat, and so I cut that down and sort of was working with printing with that, and not for the novelty of that, but just, you know, I'm excited by something which is unknown. So you have experience and practice behind you in terms of guiding your process, but you do want that possibility of potentially failure or potentially learning something new. And I think for me, writing is also that experience too. I have no idea, you know, I have a loose plan of what's going to happen, but sort of it's just working through to try and connect the dots and revise and so on. So that you know, sort of allowed that kind of design language to emerge, and that sort of going from the cover through to the sort of the section markers as well. That also sort of allowed this idea of these formal elements kind of dissipating, coming into view throughout the work, without it sort of negatively impacting the author's intentions as well.
Yeah, because one of the things I liked so much about this is, although you're using the same item to print over and over again, every single impression is slightly different, and that is exactly an anthology for me. It's we're all working to the same theme. We all have our own interpretation of that. So like this, where, you know, some of it's completely solid, some of it's barely there, just presumably how much ink was left on it at the time. But it really gives this sense of movement through the city. And when I first saw it, I was thinking, oh yes, it's flagstones, and, you know, some of them are more worn than others. And then I looked at it again, I thought, well, no, maybe it's buildings from above. And then I thought, oh, well, if it's buildings from above, then it's almost a map. But oh, look, if you turn it this way on, it's something. Well, no, maybe it's buildings from above. And then I thought, oh, well, if it's buildings from above, then it's almost a map. But oh, look, if you turn it this way on, it's something. Damn clever. Well done.
Also, you know, it's that kind of experience of what words are, what language is, what, in my case, typography is you've got these definitive characters or symbols or items, and it's how you reconfigure those, or how you repeat those, or how you compose those in order to say something. And like all of us, you know, and I hate to use an analogy here, but thinking about sort of, we're all writing about cities, so there's that kind of structure of the city there in front of us, but it's so individual. Even when you have, you know, 6 stories about cafes, they have such a different lens through which those things are seen. So Cherry, as you said, you know, sort of just how the perspectives change depending on sort of which, you know, sort of a given day, or, you know, sort of who looks at something, or which perspective you take. And early on, when you talked about how we approached you at the London Book Festival, and sort of this idea of the cacophony of that sound and only really picking up some of what we were saying. So I think probably we pitched you something that wasn't what we intended.
No, it was my version. What I heard was what we got.
Yeah, but I think this has been sort of the most enriching experience, is that working with the 3 of us working together, it's such, you know, there's similarities in approaches, but there's such different positions, or, you know, sort of experiences we come from. And similarly with, you know, the disparate sort of voices from the authors as well. All of that comes together into something which I think is so interchangeable and so unique, that when we do things like this, when we talk about it, new things keep coming to mind just because it's a conversation.
Yeah, because we've talked about it many times now, and every time something new comes up about what the process was, or the things we were thinking and not saying in the meetings. And
as you're saying with an anthology, you know, it is that sense of, yes, this all fits together, but yet it's multiple, it's different, it's the same, but it's not the same. And that, I think, is very kind of at the heart.
Yes, there's a thing in neurolinguistic programming where they say the map is not the territory. everybody experiences somewhere differently because of what they're bringing to it. And yeah, even with my story in this foundation myth, this is somewhere I go regularly, my partner goes regularly, so I said, go on then, Alex, where is this? She got it completely wrong. Because I was deliberately making it as generic as possible. She didn't get any of the cues. I was highly amused that she didn't recognise it.
So, but I think that just going back to this idea of the kind of the city map, and I think you can't really talk about geography in cities without thinking of maps and thinking about mapping as a process. And I was thinking about this the other day. It's so different to a plan. You know, a map is so different to a plan. And I think given our experience of working together, there is loosely a map, but there's not necessarily a definitive plan. And I think that was really exciting as well. And I think seeing the kind of the culmination of the work in the sort of short, the little exhibition we put together, you know, the sort of the launch, was wonderful. And how so many of the authors attended that and, you know, sort of were speaking at that and sort of performing their stories. And I bet they thought, well, I hope they thought, wow, this is really, there's a plan here. There's something which is, you know, really sort of has come together quite deliberately. But that's such a sort of small part of the conversation there again. And sort of, it just, you know, it's part of that whole journey of doing this sort of work. Yeah.
And yeah, even the stories that we turned down, there was nothing that was in any way similar to anything else. There weren't ones we were going, yeah, well, we've got one of those, so we won't have that. And we have to choose between these three essentially similar stories and just go for the one that's the best written. Everybody had got a different take on it. I mean, of the ones that I read, who knows? Because you had a fairly good filter through first, didn't you?
Sorry.
Oh yeah, no, I was just saying that there were certain themes that re-emerged. Yeah, there were certain kinds of themes that re-emerged a lot, like, but just to do with, I mean, again, that sort of same different thing, that all the stories were very different, but obviously certain kinds of stories happened in side streets, you know, which are kind of secret and confusing, and you can get lost, and that can be good or that can be scary, and you know, and whereas the main street just got a different feel. Cafes were often about encounters and other people, you know, so there's certain kinds of themes that but what people then did with those themes was very, very different.
Because again, I think partly it's to do with it being flash fiction. We had some very stylized things. I mean, quite a lot of them were just an incredibly short story that packed quite a lot in with a beginning and a middle and end, and others were much more oblique and potentially challenging, or just witty and throwaway, and you know, there's just so much variety.
The nature of sort of, I think the reception of flash fiction as a sort of as a form or device is really exciting, and it was quite interesting. Sort of when we started out, we didn't think there'd be such resistance from a sort of publishing standpoint to sort of this idea of flash fiction. So it was great to find you, Cherry, and you know, sort of your
yes, straight away.
your expertise. Well, yeah, just to sort of, just so that you were really courageous with the idea of, well, of course, yes, flash fiction is a thing and it's wonderful and we should do it. You know, it's sort of, but because I think working with a publisher who sees that the intention and sees the sort of the possibility of a project like this was really exciting for us, and it just meant that we didn't have to work too hard to sort of to get that side of things, you know, sort of fixed. And I think so it's great to sort of have your collaboration on the project guiding it through as well, and it was sort of such a learning experience.
I don't think there was much I said no to, was there? I mean,
no, I don't think so. And I think it was,
you know, because design is important to me, so you know, that didn't scare me. I mean, if you'd started saying to me, and we want to produce it as a map, you know, fold out of the book, I would have said no, because that would have been far too expensive, but I would have enjoyed the idea even so. But no, I think the only thing
we were all on the same page.
Didn't want to read everything, wasn't it?
Yeah, we were all on the same page.
Filter first, yeah.
as making something which wasn't sort of ostentatious. It wasn't sort of, you know, performing in and of itself, because it's like a vessel which has to carry multiple voices. And I think that was something which was quite shared amongst us at the beginning.
Yeah, because the problem with things like that is they become ephemeral. And, you know, this isn't a book for this week.
Yeah.
I mean, it's become very interesting reading it in lockdown. Because it's, okay, where shall I go today? You know, which town stroke city, but stroke maybe even village, with some of them you could get away with, am I going to today? Because I can't go anywhere. And you can actually,
in lockdown.
okay, today I'm in Lisbon, today I'm in Ghent, and it works. And some of the things that I mean, we did have quite a lot of fun guessing where people were really setting them, didn't we? And I'm sure people who are reading it do likewise. And I think there's one that's still just about recognisable, but we did our best to make it more generic. But there were some that just, no, you can't have this. This cannot be anywhere other than where it's set. It's so very much that place. Excellent writing, really managing to get that place over despite not having any names, but doesn't fit, sadly. And the wildly different way that people dealt with, particularly the transport. I think transport was possibly the most successful concept in this, because enormous number of the other ones, it was very much somebody visiting somewhere as opposed to someone living somewhere, whereas the transport absolutely got into the day-to-day commuterville. I do this journey every day and I sit with the same people every day and the same things happen every day. Oh, look, something different's happened. And the sort of internal monologues that people have when they're traveling, and it's something I give my students to very early on when I'm teaching my creative writing, is that write a journey, because these days say write a journey that you remember, or your journey counts if it's just a walk around the block, you know, that's fine, but write about it, because it's the amount of information that you take in without noticing that you're taking it in when you're traveling, and what you can then do with that in a story. So that was I felt possibly the most successful section in terms of getting some really different and interesting and personal stories, rather than it, because, you know, all along my thing about this was, yes, we're telling people to set these stories in the cafe or the square or the wherever it is, but actually it's people make a city. And the things that are the same are the buildings, the things that are different are the people. And so that was where it started. You know, there's one or two where, because of what is said, you kind of know where it is.
Yeah, I mean, I like the balance, the mixture of the stories that are about a city which is about living in that city, as you said. A lot of the transport was about that, but mixed with visitors' view as well, because it's about those different perspectives that you have, makes different stories. So.
And it's those sort of interconnections as well, which are really, you know, as you say, Cherry, it's hard not to think of a city and your personal connection to it, or your individual, or even sort of the human connection to a city is really important. And just sort of, you know, I think this is something we've talked about in the past as well, more recently. I wonder what the experience of writing, you know, a sort of anthology of flash fiction now would be, given the sort of experiences we've gone through with lockdown and coronavirus and so on, and how people's understanding or experience of cities might have changed, possibly, or even the themes that sort of come up to the surface now, whether they are much more hopeful or much more negative, or, you know, sort of what would sort of happen in that experience is quite sort of, yeah, it's an interesting prospect to me.
Yeah, I'm sure we will find out. I'm sure there are Corona anthologies being put out right now. I'm resisting,
Yeah.
I have to say. I've got a couple of things I've been offered that I will publish very quickly, which touch on it. But I don't want to spend, we're living it. I don't want to be reading about it as well.
Well, there's things in the moment, and then
Yeah.
the sort of the kind of the long-term shift is sort of also quite, it will be interesting how that sort of plays out too, and how we reflect on this period, and what it changes for us. I think, psychologically, also things like transport, or just the kind of just the way that movement occurs in a city might be radically or different in a small way, perhaps. We don't know. And I think sort of that is something long term, which is something which may lead to new stories or new ideas emerging.
On which subject? Are you working on anything new?
Too many things.
Well, that's why Cam has been unavailable, because he's so many things. But...
Well, I've been doing a lot of I'm working on various research projects, but I suppose the thing which is most exciting is the research I'm doing at the moment on my own PhD work, which changed, evolved, developed quite dramatically over this period. And so I'm looking at kind of local experiences of place, and that's moved everywhere from city to town to now looking at, funnily enough, the allotment experience in my own hometown. And so it's thinking about sort of how these things, navigation, geography, language, communication, how these things are sort of experienced, and how they are interdependent and interactive within these places. So that's my current sort of fascination and project.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. Well, I'm still writing flash fiction. I'm trying to write new flash fiction, and also I'm working on a novel, which is very different from flash fiction. It takes so long.
Have you found you're able to write in the current circumstances? There's a huge number of people have gone, just brain freeze.
Yeah, no, I mean, I haven't found it makes a lot of difference to me. That hasn't been an issue. I've found it actually quite conducive to writing, because I have more time. I actually have more time because I'm working from home. So I'm not. Yeah, I'm not traveling. So I do have that time. It's more about my discipline to sit down, but I would say that's not got worse with the coronavirus. It's it's the same.
What it
I'm
is.
not what it is. Yeah. I'm not psychologically.
I had to abandon the novel I was working on because I just looked at it and thought, I can't. But I've started another one in lockdown. It's my lockdown piece. Who knows?
Interesting. Yeah.
It's requiring a huge amount of research, and it's not set anywhere near here. It's in the wilds of the west of America, in the Dust Bowl, and it's completely different to what's going on, and I quite like that. And I'm writing it. I think it's going to be it's not going to be long. It might be a novella, and it might be a novella in flash, because I'm very deliberately just writing until I run out, and then just starting again wherever, and I shall decide whether it needs linking up.
Yeah, I think the novella in flash is really interesting. The thing that I'm working on can't be like that. It's just a very different pace to it, but I would really like to try writing a novella in flash. I think they're, the ones that I've read have been really.
It just leaves so much room for you to put your own versions in, doesn't it? And I'm getting more and more in favour of really thinking about what you can afford to leave out. This is my thing at the moment. What can you leave out? What can you trust the reader to figure out that's going on here? and then you test it out on someone else and they go, oh. Okay, maybe I need to explain just a tiny bit more. But yeah, the spaces in between I'm finding very interesting.
I think, yeah, motivation's been such a strange concept, I think, over this period, certainly personally, and I had, for the longest time, had this thought that, oh, a lot of other people have all this extra time, and there's this, like, you know, lots of time to sort of learn a new language, or, you know, and I think that's certainly not been my experience, and it sounds like not yours either. And but just thinking about sort of, you know, reflection, and how reflection is something we feel sometimes that we need empty space for, you know, just clear everything out of the way, time to think and reflect. But actually it's going on all the time, no matter what you're doing, no matter how busy and, you know, sort of frantic things are around you. And I think maybe because of that sort of intensity of sort of what you're reflecting on and how, maybe it awakens this idea of creating something which is more resonant, perhaps, you know, with intended audiences, or thinking about the experience of how things are received becomes much more alive, because you're having to focus and think about something. So maybe this period's allowed us to sort of just recalibrate a little bit about sort of not just sort of the why and how, but just kind of who it's for, and sort of, you know, where it's going, maybe.
What I'm finding is, yes, I am doing the reflecting whilst doing everything else at once, but then I can't capture it. There's things I go, oh yeah, that. And then when I've got the time, I'm thinking, what was it? It's just gone. My brain is just like a sieve at the moment.
So it's like,
while I'm teaching, I'll think, oh yes, I must tell them that, and it's gone again before.
Right.
Yeah, I did have that a bit actually at the beginning of lockdown. I felt quite distracted. I had more time, but I got less done each day, so it worked out about the same. Because I just couldn't concentrate on anything for that long.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Okay. It feels like we've drifted a bit, and I'm not sure that I'll use this necessarily.
A therapy session.
Maybe just one or two bits.
I think personally, just saying that it feels like a long time ago that this project started, and it feels like a long time ago this project sort of came to the kind of resolution, I suppose, of the book object itself. But it's still really exciting, and it feels still very much alive as a project. And I think that's something which I don't know if that's usual in a sort of in a project like this.
It has had good longevity, this one. I mean, in terms of bookshelves in bookshops, you're lucky if it's there for 6 months, unless something really takes off. But this has just gone on. It's a trickle going out most weeks. We're probably very nearly sold out. I need to check that. And it's the second most often requested through our website.
Oh wow!
You know, it'll be whatever the current book is, and then this one. Bookshops get it immediately. Festivals, when we've managed to get them to talk to us at all, get it immediately. And you know, and of course, the other thing with an anthology is that you've got all of those writers telling people about it. That really helps. When you've got 42 authors all around the world, all doing their occasional tweet about it or something, it keeps it up there and people notice, which is very handy.
Yeah.
And then of course we do things like this to remind people.
Bottom on seat, skirt tucked under, shoulder to metal to purring glass. I breathe lightly, scroll through my phone, leave me alone. The man next to me is fastidious in his untouching. I sense the tension in his pressed together thighs, blue trousers so tight they could be body paint. He scrolls his phone too. I leave you alone, lady, don't care about you. I love him.
Crash! Hello, tarmac. Why am I lying under a bicycle? Can you help me, loud swearing man? Bicycle gone, limp round the corner. Rain comes harder, into archway, sink to floor, rub hands and knees. Can't stay here, must be that way, left and right, and left and right. Still no clues. Here's a square, giant trees, sheltered benches, sit and rest. Doze, sleep. Jerk, awake, shiver, cold, up again and on. Why no phone boxes? Why no street maps? Bloody internet, bloody faulty charger. Leg hurts, really not funny. Church for sanctuary, imposing oak doors firmly locked. I'd pay tithe by plastic. Nearby doorway, here's plastic and cardboard. Need sleep, make a bed. Ow! Here's a body, not warm, not good. Why is there no one? Stumble on, get help. Remember, church tower, face the streets, streaming wet. Finally, bar open. Barman looks. Reach for wallet. No wallet. Where wallet? Tarmac wallet.
I see her for the first time while I'm still a student, adrift in the haze of youth. I'm on the subway. The carriage is half empty, holding only tourists, nannies, and me, all caught in the grip of stale air and mid-afternoon lethargy. The noise is deafening. I can only just hear the babies crying over the screeching metal of wheels on track. Suddenly, the dark windows light up. Another train, on one of those rare sections where two tracks run parallel. They are so matched in speed that neither train seems to be moving at all. Our trajectories are given away only by the tightness of travellers' grips on the handrails, the shaking, and the noise. And then I see her. We've never met, and yet I know her intimately, because she is me.
Through those meetings and destructions and rebuildings, their place grew, and over millennia it grew to this, the crossroads where you paused a year ago, a decade ago, longer, and thought, my place, and put down your walking staff and stopped to talk, to trade, and gradually gathered a family, a clan, a tribe, saying, our place, and building and welcoming strangers like me, willing to share. And that defensible sticks it now crawl. And we regret that we still think it, all these millennia later. Sometimes you forget that you have not always lived here. Sometimes you need to step into the footprint of the first woman and see this place, our place, anew, and put aside defence for the openness she saw on that opposite shore.
Return to the hotel. It is no longer here. The taxi dropped us off here this morning, we think. We're pretty sure, we hope. And there is a hotel here, and it looks like our hotel, but it does not have the name of our hotel. So we look at the dot on our phone, and we find that we are almost in the right place, but not quite. We need to move up the street a bit. So we move up the street until we reach the dot. But the dot is not in the right place. It marks an empty shop that we do not recognise at all. So we ask a passerby, who tells us that the place we are looking for is not in this street at all. So we turn right and right again and find another street with another hotel that has the right name. But this hotel does not look like our hotel.